You can get a copy at powernomics.com. And again, if you believe in the cause, you want to support the Andersons, you can go to the site, and if you got extra money, buy some extra copies, give them away. I give copies away for Christmas gifts. At my wedding, we gave away wedding gifts that consisted of a copy of Powernomics, things like that. So anybody can do that. So I encourage you to consider doing the same if you are blessed in that way. Powernomics.com. That's the website. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start reading, and we're just gonna kind of dive into it. And I'm making notes here so we can remember what we're going to cover tonight. So he says here on page 92 of Powernomics that education is supposed to reward citizens for academic achievements based on the rule that the more education you have, the more wealth and money you gain. However, he has a figure here, figure 11, that tracks economic and educational progress and reveals that there is practically no relationship between Black people's level of wealth and income and their level of educational achievements. So he shows on this chart, he has 1860, the eve of the Civil War. He says Black people were enslaved 98 to 99%. The Black illiteracy rate was 98%. Blacks own 0.5% of all the wealth. Then he shows 1960, 100 years later, Blacks still own 0.5% of all the wealth. And also the illiteracy rate went from 99% down to 14%. So we started reading, learning, everything else, getting education, but we did not actually grow in terms of businesses owned and wealth accumulated. In fact, in 1860, we had the same percentage of the total business income in America that we had in 1960. He says here in 1860, this is on page 93 of Powernomics, he says business income of Black people is less than 1% of total business income in America. In 1960, business income of Black Americans is less than 1% of the total business income in America. So one of the things that we understand, and we have to reiterate today, is that if Black people can't create job creators, then we will never be able to have jobs. If we don't create people who can create jobs, then those jobs will not be created for our people. We will not have those jobs. We will not have those opportunities. So one of the things that's really important is in the educational process, a rite of passage of every Black child should be something that relates to the ability to manifest and create something that is economically relevant to their life. Education does not do that. Education has its value. Some of it is an indoctrination system that teaches you the values of your teacher. Many of our teachers turned white after integration. And then also education, it helps in certain ways. It helps you have better conversations. Maybe you know a lot of random facts. Maybe you can write a memo or an email better than you could without being educated. I'm not going to say that that's worthless, but on that wealth front, the education doesn't do it. Dr. Anderson proves that. And now it's even more dangerous because student loans have actually caused Black wealth to go backward. So not only are you not moving forward, but you're actually going backward, and education is the reason why. Okay. All right. So give me a yes in the chat if you understand what I'm saying. If you understand that I'm not saying that education is bad or that you shouldn't go to school or that college is a waste of time. What I'm saying is that you got to supplement that. You got to add into that. Okay. So he says here that he says, when we examine the educational accomplishments of Blacks from the 1860s to the 1960s, we see some astounding accomplishments. Figure 11 shows that in the early 1860s, approximately 98% of America's Black population was illiterate by design. Following the Civil War, nearly 25 million European immigrants came to America with the same illiteracy as the Black ex-slaves. So you couldn't read. Immigrants came to the country and they couldn't read either. They didn't know how to read English, right? So he says within 30 years, between the Emancipation and the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896, Blacks cut their illiteracy in half. That's pretty impressive. So let's see, they cut their illiteracy in half, reduced it from 98% to 48%. Blacks reduced their illiteracy twice as fast as the European immigrants. So you were learning faster than the immigrants were. However, as European immigrants achieved educationally, they moved up in terms of wealth, income, and political empowerment, social acceptance, and business ownership. Blacks were on the bottom and stayed on the bottom. There was no direct relationship between their astounding educational achievements and benefits. Blacks did not receive increased incomes, upward mobility, or political empowerment in accord with their educational achievements. So let's process this. I want us to kind of meditate on the words. So what did we not get from education? We did not get higher incomes. We did not get upward mobility. You might be an educated Negro, but you weren't an accepted Negro. You were trying to achieve acceptability, but you didn't get it. You didn't get the upward mobility you deserved, or political empowerment. You weren't empowered politically, according to Dr. Anderson. He says, in accord with their educational achievements, the reason for their lack of forward mobility is simple. Educational achievement by itself cannot override structural racism and makes Blacks politically and economically education. Let me read that again. Sorry, I messed up the sentence. Educational achievement by itself cannot override structural racism and make Blacks politically and economically self-sufficient or competitive. So what he's doing is he's separating the two things. He's separating the two. This is Powernomics, page 92, powernomics.com. That's where you can get a copy for your kids. Everybody should please do that. Please, please, please do that. In fact, buy the whole library pack. Support the Andersons. This family deserves it. They are good people. They care about you. So he's sorting the two. He's sort of helping you get out of this mindset where you think that somehow achievement as a Black person is connected to going to school, or it's almost as flawed as people who believe that playing basketball will get you out of the hood. For some people, it does get them out of the hood. That 1% of 1%, 99.9%, it doesn't work. So the same thing is true. While we might make fun of those people who think that basketball will get them out of the hood, well, they can make fun of us by thinking that formal education will get you out of the trap. Okay, you're in a trap. Structural racism is a trap. You are a rat inside some sort of a cage. And so what he's saying is that educational achievement does not override. Let's process these words, because we're going somewhere with this. Structural racism, or it make Blacks politically and economically self-sufficient or competitive. Those are the key words. Structural racism. That means that your education doesn't change America. It doesn't change the way America was built. It's a structure. You live inside that structure. That building structure does not change just because you've changed. Okay. The second thing is he talks about self-sufficiency. Education doesn't make you independent of the system. Education integrates you into the system. Education helps you connect with the system, right? So on one hand, it can achieve certain things, right? It can create scenarios where the system is less likely to reject you. But when it's a flawed system in the first place, then you are, to some extent, some of us actually find that our education sucked us deeper in the trap because we become more connected and dependent on a system that has an inherent racialized glass ceiling that Black people will never surpass. Do you understand what I'm saying? Give me a yes if you follow what I'm saying, because I want to speak slowly so I don't end up sounding crazy or talking over anybody's head. And then he talks about being competitive. So competition and cooperation are two different concepts. Now, competition and cooperation can coexist. I can cooperate with you, but still be competitive with you. We can work together, but I can still make sure I represent my own interests. So Black people, we are very cooperative, but unfortunately, we're not super competitive. So when we are cooperative without being competitive, that leads us to a situation where we get subordinated. Right, where we become slaves to that system, because you're trying to cooperate with something without actually competing with it and demanding a certain level of equity in the whole process. Okay, so those are the words that he uses that I want you to really think about to understand. Okay, what do I need to add to the education? Okay, well, so you got to go to school, study hard, reading, writing, math. I don't know if I've told you guys what I think. If I had a school, if we started the Boyce Watkins school tomorrow, the 6 things I would teach every Black child. I'll give it to you. The first 3 are easy. It's the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. My grandma used to call it that. So reading, so you can consume as much information as possible. The more you read, the better you'll be able to process information. Writing, just so you can communicate your ideas. You have something that's on your mind. If you can write well, you can get it out, and people respect your ideas because they can understand what you're saying. Arithmetic, math is important, because if I can't do math, I can't do business. If I can't count my money, how am I going to make money if I can't even count it? Right. So ultimately, math is important in terms of giving you logic and the ability to take your resources and compile them. Right. It's hard to become rich if you can't count your money. OK, you follow what I'm saying? All right. So it's reading, writing, arithmetic. The next 3 things are 3 business related areas. Every Black child would know how to start a business, so that in case they don't get the job they want, they have options and freedom. Freedom is options. That's all it is. Freedom is options. I teach a whole class on stock options, right? And when first thing we talk about is what options are. One thing about options is, number one, this is from option theory in finance. The first thing they teach you about options is that an option can never have a negative value. And what does that mean? That means that you're never worse off when you have more options. You're probably better off. When you have more options, you're almost never worse off, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing about options is all options are is just freedom, latitude, the ability to do things. And options and freedom are the opposite of slavery, oppression, which creates depression. You feel depressed and you feel sad when you don't have freedom and you don't have options. This is how they found this out when they studied rats in a lab. They found that when they didn't have options, when they weren't allowed to do anything, they were very sad. They were very depressed. Okay, so ultimately, having options and freedom is very important. So you give that to your child by making sure they know how to start a business. Two, they should all be invested in the stock market. We talk about that, the $5 a day plan. Go to boycewatkins.com if you want to get a copy of the $5 a day plan. That book is free. It's on Amazon. You could buy a hard copy if you want, but you don't have to buy a hard copy. The ebook is free. Just go to boycewatkins.com. You can find that. The third is real estate. Property ownership, the accumulation of assets, the accumulation of resources is the secret to wealth. Wealth builders are simply accumulators. All they are is hoarders. They compile, they grab, they pull in more than they give away. They're stingy with their money, but they accumulate as much as they want. Like a football team that scores a lot of points, but has a really good defense. They score a lot of points and they don't give up any points. Well, that's a championship winning team. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if you want Black folks to win championships, then we must shift our culture to one where we take everything and we give away nothing. We have to be stingy with the ball, so to speak, with the economic ball. We've got to be stingy and we got to score as many points as possible, give away as few points as possible. That's how you win a championship. Right now, unfortunately, for some parts of our culture, we do the opposite. We give away lots of points and we don't score many points. So if you do that in a sport, what's going to happen if you have a basketball team that gives away a ton of points but doesn't score any? What's going to happen? Is that team going to win or are they going to lose? Are they going to be winners? They're going to be losers. Write it in the chat. Winners or losers? Which one would you be? Right? You're going to be losers. Okay. So the last piece, so we talked about this all: reading, writing, math, real estate, entrepreneurship, and stocks and bonds, ownership of stocks. The seventh component would be something related to critical thinking skill. I find that Black people, especially Black men, who have critical thinking skill, maybe from chess or math or whatever, they just tend to figure things out. They're able to solve problems. And I think that being Black means you're constantly solving problems, and you have to be able to solve the problems without being overwhelmed by them or being frightened by them. But unfortunately, this matrix that you live in is constantly full of puzzles and things that they're persuading you to do. They're consistently manipulating your conscious and your subconscious mind on every single level. So critical thinking skill is a type of awareness and alertness and wokeness, if you will, that allows you to just kind of question everything, to kind of say, that doesn't look right to me. I don't think I want to do that. Yeah, I know everybody else is doing it, but I'm not going to do that. You understand? Okay, so let me keep reading here. So these are the things that you add on to your education in order to be successful. If you have the ability, you can't necessarily override structural racism like Dr. Anderson talks about, but you can get away from it. A person who has self-sufficiency and competitiveness to some extent does have that ability to override structural racism by being aware enough to know I don't even have to really live in some parts of that structure. Like I don't really have to spend my whole life working for a white man who hates me. I can actually go over here and find a place that's a little bit better for me. So let's keep going. He says also indicated in the figure, the spectacular educational achievements of Blacks did not translate into the same economic benefits that they did for Jews or other European immigrants before and after World War I. Jewish immigrants were coming into this country with illiteracy rates equal to Blacks. But since they were not Black, they were accepted into the banking, clothing, entertainment, and jewelry industries and professions. As long as they were being accepted, a national racial backlash moved across the country in opposition to Black people. In the South, members of the majority society burned Black farmers' crops, poisoned their animals, poured kerosene on their farm crops, and lynched at least one Black man per day. Their nearly impossible educational achievements did not change Black status in terms of power, wealth, and upward mobility. Now, if you all remember, I did one lecture in this series. We've done probably over 100 classes on Powernomics and Dr. Anderson's words, and we're going to do hundreds more. One of them I spent the whole time reading to you hundreds of laws that were made specifically to control Black people that you never learned about in public school. Anybody remember that? Anybody been around long enough to where you remember me reading that list? Go find it. If you want to get copies of the previous lectures, you can go to drboycebookclub.com. That's drboycebookclub.com. And I did one where literally I read all these laws. And it was fascinating. I didn't even know that there was a law in one state that said a Black person can't look out the same window as a white person. There were laws that said that in certain industries, Black people are not allowed to get a license in that industry. And so what this did was this help us understand kind of how sinister and how premeditated Black oppression was. How they spent a lot of time thinking, okay, how do we make sure we can make money off these people and not allow them to participate in any of these benefits? And that was good for me because it reminded me that your ancestors were not lazy. Your great-grandparents didn't have, it's not like they didn't have dreams the way you have dreams. It's not that they didn't have skill the way you have skill. They were just as intelligent as you. So you got to ask yourself that question, right? A lot of you, for example, some of you in here are doing really well. Some of you in here are educating your kids. Some of you in here are on top of the world. Some of you in here are millionaires. I know this because I talk to you and I hear your stories. And so imagine, as smart as you are, as capable as you are, you're a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, college professor, all that. Imagine if you lived 80 years, all of you, and there's nothing to show for it. Like you died and there's no assets left to the kids, no property, no businesses, no nothing. And the grandkids went off thinking that you spent your whole life doing nothing, that you weren't even trying to do anything for them. That would be crazy. That would not be true. So what I do, to me, it's almost like solving a crime. It's like figuring out like what happened to all the missing assets. What did they do to take away the legacy of all these people that we care about, these people that we would know about, these people we would honor and celebrate if we even knew they even existed? And this is the danger of what the school system does. It wipes all that out. It's like they didn't even exist. And I encourage you to be sensitive to that in terms of how we must rewrite history in order to understand who we really are. Because I don't think you would enjoy if you and I, all of us, think about this. Some of us, we've been riding together for years. We're sitting here, we're doing the damn thing. We're changing the world. Imagine if we just die and nobody even remembers in this. Nobody cares. They act like it never happened, or somebody else does something just like what we're doing right now. They do it 120 years from now, and they really think that they're the first smart Black people in history and that we were all just stupid. That would be wrong. That would be inaccurate. Okay, so we owe it to ourselves to go find out the truth. Okay, we owe it to ourselves to give our children a proper history that is disconnected from the fundamentally flawed, racist, ridiculous, almost insane information that's being taught in the public school system. Like this idea that, for example, the fact that they don't even know that Africans were here in America way before Christopher Columbus. Even Columbus knew it, right? That's all silly. It's crazy. Okay, so let me keep reading here. Let me move on. All right, so page 894. Even as late as the early 1950s, census data indicated that a white high school graduate earned more than a Black college graduate. A Black person earned only 54 cents for every dollar a white person earned. The largest number of Blacks ever entered college and government service following the Black Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. So Civil Rights Movement comes along, and according to Powernomics, page 94, when Black people get the civil rights movement and we march and hold hands and sing "We Shall Overcome," suddenly all these doors open. White people start inviting us to come to their universities and work for their companies and shop in their stores and live in their neighborhoods. So we're moving on up like George and Wheezy. So he says the largest number of Blacks ever entered college and government service following the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Blacks' earned income went as high as 67 cents for every dollar that whites earned in the mid-1970s, before falling back down to 56 cents in the 1980s. So this was that backlash. This is the downside of political progress. If you don't have some sort of base or foundation of power to protect your gains, then they're going to just be clawed back from you anyway. So in the 1980s, from what I understand, that's when they started that whole backlash against things like affirmative action and stuff like that. And so the things that we came to depend on were being taken away from us. So let me keep reading here. He says, income has remained relatively unchanged. Nearly a half century after the civil rights movement began, Blacks' earned income is back where it was in the 1950s. Education has yet to offer the same economic or wealth rewards to blacks that it does to whites. Unfortunately, many black leaders, just like whites, tend to believe that the legacies of centuries of slavery, Jim Crow, semi-slavery, and benign neglect policies ended in the 1970s. Even with increasing evidence that integration has failed, they continue to believe that integration in and of itself wiped the racial slate clean. They believe all ethnic and racial groups started out even in the 1970s, and therefore, if black people are suffering inequalities, they are due to the differences in natural talents. It is naive of black and white leadership to believe that 4 centuries of racial exploitation, oppression, and denial of educational opportunities can be so easily erased. Wealth and other inequalities continue primarily because the planned inferior education provided to blacks was never designed to give them countervailing power to offset the racism to which they would be exposed in mainstream society. I'm going to sip my coffee for a minute while we process that last sentence. So you know what I'm getting from this? I'm getting that we have to really stop and really meditate on the sheer insanity that we as black people believe white people should be educating our kids in the first place. That right there is us accepting racial inferiority, because they're not going to let us educate their kids. Do you think so? I mean, do you think the Jewish community would let me raise Jewish kids and, create like you got BET, Black Entertainment Television. What if I created JET, and I called it Jewish Entertainment Television, and I started shaping Jewish culture with my entertainment company? And I got a bunch of Jewish people to go out and act like buffoons and, act like some of these ignorant rappers, act like Lizzo. And I started saying, this is the culture. This is the Jewish culture. And what do you think would happen? What do you think they would do? They would be heated. There you go. Thank you, Shamika. They would be mad. They wouldn't allow that to happen. So the question I ask myself is, why aren't we mad? What is going on? What's causing us to think that it's okay for people to do things toward us that they would never allow us to do toward them? And why do we accept that? And I think part of the reason we're not mad is because it's very comfortable to stick with the status quo. It's very comfortable to stick with what you were taught since birth. It's also very comfortable to believe that when you talk about things like entertainment, it's very easy to believe that a black person that's making a lot of money is a successful black person, or because I believe we're inherently wired to white supremacy. We're inherently wired to believe that acceptance from whites is the holy grail. And I think until we let that belief go, we'll never have the ability to achieve all that independence we talk about, because independence requires confidence and self-esteem. You got to have the confidence to say, I don't care what they're doing over there. This is what we're doing over here. It's like my mama, when I would tell my mama about how the other kids' parents were punishing them and that they weren't grounding them for 2 weeks, like I was grounded for 2 weeks. What would your mama say? She said, I don't care what they're doing down the street. This is what we're doing in this house. And my mother would talk about how hard that was, because all of her friends would tell her that she was being too mean and she was being too harsh. And maybe she was at times. That makes it even worse when she was being too hard, right? But at the same time, because she and my father had that courage to be independent and disconnected, they were able to have outcomes that were independent and disconnected of the very same systems that sucked down most of my friends. I've talked a little bit about this, and I will say, when I think about all the kids I played with when I was a kid, I had cousins on one side of my family that I would hang out with, and on the other side. And then my mother had a best friend that had kids. And I was going down the list, and I said, okay, he's in jail. He's a drug addict. He's a drug addict. He's a drug addict. He should be in jail. And I'm going down the list. I'm thinking, how did that happen? How in the world did we not get caught up in the winds of all that? Well, it's because they pulled us out of that system, out of that systematic, whatever those cultural influences were that were driving, my friends, all my friends. I'm not talking about that, like 30% of them. I'm talking about at least 90% of my friends. Whatever was pulling them in that direction, the whole like broken black man, broken black woman direction, my parents just pulled us out of it. They pulled us out of those tailwinds and said, we're going over here and we don't care what nobody else is doing. And so I want to encourage that in you. That's my point. I want you to understand that in order for you to have a better school system for your kids, you're going to have to build that. If you want a better world in general, you're going to have to be willing to build that. And not everybody is willing to build. Not everybody has the patience to build. Not everybody has the courage to build. And not everybody has the skill, or at least knows the people that have the skill. I'd like to help. That's why I'm doing these Powernomics trainings online, because I'm like, well, this can kind of be a piece of our own Black-owned educational system. The same way that white teacher can sit in front of a classroom and teach. Well, I know how to sit in front of a classroom and teach too. So what I think we want to do as people, and what I appreciate and respect about all of you that are here, is that you understand, and I want to help you understand. I want to encourage you. You understand that you don't have to take the options that are presented to you. You can create something better. And it's not that hard to do. There are so many of you. In fact, give me a yes in the chat if you are a Black person with a skill, if you are a teacher, if you are a carpenter, if you are a real estate agent, if you are an attorney, if you are a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, right? Like, give me a yes. Like, so many of you have so many skills, and this is where that formal education benefits us. A lot of us, there's a lot of educated Black people in this room. Right. So you can't tell me that we can't build the world that we want to build. And I want to encourage us to just be very intentional, very deliberate about that, so that when you start feeling the stress of racial oppression, you start feeling bad because they're not treating your child well at school, or your boss is treating you like crap on the job, you always know that God gave you many options that go beyond simply sitting up under the white man and hoping that he decides to not keep mistreating you the way he has before. You've always got options and choices, but you got to know how to look for them. You got to have the courage to pursue them. So two things: you got to have awareness that they exist, and you must have the courage to pursue them. Right now, I am a professor who is not in a university. It's like being a pastor with no church. So I left Syracuse University because of the racism, like everybody else. Everybody else, same stuff y'all deal with. I dealt with that too. And here I am. And I said, okay, but I want to be at a university because I like that. So I created the Black Business School. And you can't tell me that the Black Business School is not as relevant, if not more relevant, than any university on this planet. There is no campus on this planet that could hire me to get me to walk away from the Black Business School. And that is a type of thinking that I had to develop by being committed to the idea that I am good enough, that I don't need his validation. I don't need validation from inferior people for me to know that I can be as great of a Black man as I want to be. So I encourage you to choose greatness. And whether that means, you raising your kids in a certain way that's different from everybody else, you homeschooling your kids and making your homeschool better than any public school out here, building a little business where you run that sucker as if you're working with Amazon or IBM or Apple, right? You got to respect what you own. You must just sort of look at what you have and say, you know what, this might not be a big piece of property that I own right now, but I'm really going to pour the love into it that I would if I was working for this person over here. Because that's the thing. We tend to sort of respect ourselves more and value the resources we have access to more when it's part of something that we see as established. Like if I work at Apple or if I work at Amazon, I feel legitimate. But if I'm not working for them and I'm starting my own business and nobody knows about it, I feel less legitimate. Well, I encourage you to kind of confront that, right? And so this is a self-esteem exercise. This isn't just about skill. There are intangibles about success that go beyond how much you've learned. I know a lot of really highly educated people who are not that smart, who will never accomplish anything because once you have the ideas in your head, you have to have the courage to pursue them. So I encourage you to also focus on those intangibles, like thinking big, having the courage to think big, acting on the things that you believe in, accepting the fact that you're going to make mistakes, doing these sorts of things. That's how people end up doing amazing things. You have to have those intangibles, which are really more emotional than they are just, things you'll learn in a textbook. Those emotional things like, okay, you know what? I don't know how to do it, but I got faith and I'm going to go hard. I'm going to do my best. We're going to have excellence. We're going to learn what we need to learn, right? Just attitudes like that'll take you further than that bachelor's degree or that master's degree. Because I've seen a little bit of both of that, right? I have a lot of formal education, but then really what put me in front of you right now doing what I do today had nothing to do with me going to school. It was about me learning how to love Boyce and me learning how to love what I was doing, and me learning how to respect what I have as much as I respected what he had. And it was hard because I've seen what he had since I was a little kid. I was raised to believe that acceptance from certain groups going to Harvard or working for some big corporation was that those were just sort of validators that made you feel better. And that's very risky when your oppressor is validating you, because then they can take those validations away when you get out of line, which is going to cause you to start to feel certain amounts of insecurity. So we're going to need confident Black people to really lead this revolution. And I think that you're in that category and that's why you're here. Okay. So let me keep going. He says here on page 94 of powernomics.com, that's the book I'm reading from. If you haven't gotten a copy, go to powernomics.com. Dr. Anderson has a whole library pack. It's $99. It's really great. He says, education isn't enough. Since education was not designed to eradicate wealth or other inequalities between the races, were the descendants of slaves wrong in wanting an education? No, they were not wrong. It's just that education was not enough. See, that's kind of what I was just saying, right? So I guess we think alike here. He says the majority society knew this during Reconstruction when they elected to deny Black ex-slaves 40 acres and a mule and give them marginal education instead. So instead of giving them property, they gave them more education. Instead of giving them assets they own, they gave them an indoctrination into the white-owned educational system. That's a lot like now, where integration, you traded in your businesses and your property for corporate jobs and student loans. That's similar to me. That almost is a perfect parallel. So they didn't give them, or if you think about this, right? And we've mentioned this, but I'll mention it again now because it's appropriate. Think about how easy it is to get $100,000 in a student loan, but you can't get $15,000, $20,000 for a business loan. Why in the world would you give me $100,000 to an 18-year-old for a student loan for an overpriced education that he probably won't be able to pay back, but you won't give him $20,000 to go start a business, right? So basically what happened over 100 years ago is instead of giving them something that's going to help them develop an asset like 40 acres and a mule, they could have even loaned them the money to go buy 40 acres and a mule, right? Even that would have been better than what they gave them, which was marginal education, right? So it says education is an empowerment tool only when it is used in the right sequence. Black people were given no choice but to focus on social and educational rights rather than economic rights. So when you're pursuing the social and the educational, but you don't have the economic, then you really have nothing. You have to do it the other way around. Dr. Anderson says the economics must be the foundation of the social and the educational. I was talking to somebody about that earlier today. Oh gosh, was it today or yesterday? Where I said the person who has the money gets to decide what the culture is going to be. They get to decide what the socializing is going to look like. They get to decide what the education is going to look like. You need the money to really do anything in this country. So when you come in with the social and the educational, but you don't have the economic, then then everything that you do is going to be disrespected and undermined, because the people with the money are going to make the decisions. Look at, for example, BET. BET, Black Entertainment Television, is a network that markets to Black people that's owned by whites. And so Black people, we show up with all the talent, we show up with all the culture, we show up with all the swag, but they show up with the $1 billion in funding necessary to run that entertainment behemoth. So who do you think is going to make the decisions when it's time to decide which direction the company is going to go? It ain't going to be Chris Brown. It ain't going to be Lizzo or somebody on stage. It's going to be the person. It's going to be that white man in the back who's writing the checks. Same thing is true when we talk about politics. We are misled into believing that the voters will control the politicians by who they vote for. No, the people that control the politics in America are the people who write the checks. Okay, that's why do you think Joe Biden passed that law in the first place that said you can't declare bankruptcy on your student loans? That if you get student loans and you go bankrupt, you can't write off your student loans. The people didn't ask for that. You think the voters asked for that? I don't know. What do y'all think? Y'all think the voters got all lined up and said, hey, we want you to pass a law that says if we ever declare bankruptcy, we can never get out of our student loans and it becomes a life debt? Do you think the voters wanted that? What do y'all think? Do you think the voters demanded that from him and he gave in to the overwhelming demand? No. Somebody in one of those dark cigar-filled rooms where the tycoons meet had a meeting with Biden and said, now that we've got you into office, here's what we need you to do. And he tried to do it in the 1990s. And Elizabeth Warren, bless her soul, as far as, white women go, she seems to be more decent than most. She actually fought against that because she's a bankruptcy expert from Harvard who knew that, she said, if this is passed, this is going to cause a student loan debt crisis. It's going to ruin tons of families. So Biden tried to pass it in the 90s. Elizabeth Warren helped block it. She lobbied Hillary Clinton, who went to Bill. Bill vetoed it. It didn't go through. In 2005, she tried to block it again. Biden tried to push it through. What was it? Elizabeth Warren fought it. Barack Obama voted against it. To his credit, Hillary Clinton, this time, she supported it. So in 2005, they passed that law. I forgot what it's called. I can't remember the name of it. But of course, they gave it some stupid name to make it seem like they were actually doing this on behalf of the consumers. And so after 2005, when they show charts of student loan debt, it shot through the roof because people were locked into that debt for life. So bankers were like, yeah, we'll loan you money because now we know we're going to get our money back. We can come to your house and squeeze blood out of a turnip. We can basically break your ankles and pull money out of your pay, garnish your wages, whatever we got to do. So they were willing to loan more money. So that's what led to student loan amounts just really going out of control. Okay, so that's kind of the history. So ultimately, the economics is what drove that. It wasn't the politics. It wasn't the voters who drove that. And that's just one example. So he says, in a capitalist democracy, however, economic achievement and mobility must occur before a group attempts to open up channels of educational opportunities. The educational achievements will then engender a corresponding set of cultural values. See, he's using that word culture. Let's underline that. Of cultural values and a further appreciation for educational achievement. Education allows a group to consolidate and extend its economic gains in the marketplaces. So let's sort of write this down in our head. We got economics as the base, and he mentioned the words culture. The person who controls the economics controls the culture. You control the education. Or you could say culture / values, and then the politics. So you could say the CEP, the culture, the education, and the politics are controlled by the people who manage the economics. He says, fortunately, when Jewish immigrants began immigrating into this country in the latter part of the 19th century, they first established an economic base. Fortunately, they entered the country with some skills that were needed in America's emerging industries. They were able to capture these industries based on cultural experiences and chance them on educational achievements. After succeeding in these industries, they used their acquired wealth, political clout, and social acceptance to enter and begin dominating education. If Blacks are going to eliminate the myths about why they have not achieved, they must understand that structural racism forced Black Americans to lift themselves in reverse by putting education and social goals before economics. Though Blacks demonstrated spectacular educational achievement and a total willingness to be long-suffering, they could not translate those educational achievements into economic gains. There is practically no inherent economic power associated with educational achievement. Wow. There is practically no inherent economic power associated with educational achievement. Black America has encouraged its children to get a good education and find a good job in a white corporation or some level of government. Most ethnics, especially Jews and Asians, encourage their children to get a good education, develop some on-the-job experience, then use their education to start their own business. There are few Black businesses in which Black children can use their educational skills. As stated earlier, clearly a fundamental change is needed in the role that school plays in the lives of Black people. Let's take a breath for a minute. I gotta relax. My brain is like a car engine. I start to overheat, so I'm gonna try to. Did y'all get that? Did y'all hear that? Are y'all internalizing that? I think that last paragraph was very powerful. It's very powerful. There's practically no inherent economic power associated with educational achievement. We've encouraged our children to get a good education and find a good job in a white corporation or some level of government. This model does not work. He says that when he talks about other ethnic groups, not to put them on a pedestal, he said they encourage their children to get a good education. So educational excellence is a good start. That I like that part, right? I like the idea of you telling your kids, if you go to school, do well. right? These are values. Work hard, do your best, set goals, make a plan, right? All these things, right? So that's going to do well educationally. Now, I think that what you have to do is you can't let the education define you, though. You can't say, well, I'm successful because I got a good education. I would look at it like your educational achievement is a reflection of the inherent value that you're bringing to the table because you got the right values. So your values, almost like a sun radiating energy out into the air, right? Or into the space. It's radiating this energy because there's this internal thing that's causing these explosions that's really sending out this powerful energy. So your educational achievement is merely a stepping stone in that whole life journey that you're manifesting because you've got something special inside. You got the juice. So of course you're going to do well educationally because your parents raised you to have great values. They raised you to work hard. They raised you to never give up. They raised you to always come through. They raised you to complete things. So what you then do is you keep climbing up the ladder. So you say, okay, now that I have done all these great things educationally because I'm just such a fly ass Black person, now I'm going to go to the next stage. I need some experience and I don't have capital. Maybe my parents didn't give me any resources. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to get a job and get me some training. And I'm going to do great on that job. I'm going to do so great that they're going to want to promote me to become CEO one day, but I don't want to be CEO because I'm climbing the ladder. This is a stepping stone. So I'm on this job. I'm learning all these skills. And because I'm such a fly ass Black person who has these great values and this great culture of work ethic and delayed gratification, I'm succeeding again. So so having this fancy job does not define me. I'm not a great man because I got the fancy job. I got the fancy job because I'm a great man. Do you follow what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not a great man because I made good grades and have a degree. I have a degree and made good grades because I'm a great man. So I'm a great man, whether you could kick me out of this university tomorrow or kick me out of this job tomorrow. I can get fired on my day off for talking smack to my boss, but that still means I'm still a great man. I just don't fit into your system anymore. But I'm still great. I'm still extraordinary. And that's my license. That is my value. That is an asset I own because I own the essence of me. I own my self-esteem. I own my identity, and I can carry this wherever I go. So because I'm bringing all this energy in, like the sun, I'm a fly-ass Black person, anything I touch is going to turn to gold. I don't need you to hand me gold. You can hand me a frozen turd, and I'm going to touch that frozen turd and turn it into gold because that's who I am. That's what I'm bringing to the table. The melanin is where my power is at. My culture is where my power is at. So I don't need to be next to you for me to be powerful and relevant. I'm powerful and relevant. You become more relevant when you're next to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like this is important. This is really critical. You have to know this. That way you don't spend your time chasing behind mediocre ass people who don't even like you or respect you. You don't need those people. You got the juice. It's all right there. If you make the juice, it's like Kool-Aid. You gotta stir it and make it. But you've got it. You've got the juice. You've got the culture. You're creating that in your house, right? So then the stepping stone, climbing the ladder. So I'm not a great man because I made good grades. I made good grades because I'm a great man. I didn't get getting the fancy job does not make me a special relevant person. I got the fancy job because I'm a special relevant person. And then the next step on that ladder is now I'm going back to my community. I'm building this business. I'm going to raise this capital and we're going to run this company and we're going to create jobs. Here's the thing about job creation in the Black community and why Black people, so certain segments of our community will always complain about unemployment. Until Black people learned how to create jobs in the Black community, then the Black community will have no jobs. Until we learn how to raise a whole entire armies of young kids that want to grow up and become job creators, we will always have an unemployment problem. We will always have an unemployment problem. Because number one, white folks don't love you. And it's okay. It's not racist that I'm saying that. It's just true. Because I don't know how much I love them. I don't hate them. I just don't even think about them. They don't think about me. So ultimately, the way you solve that problem, it must come from within. So when you're raising these little fly ass black kids who come from an extraordinary culture of work ethic and discipline and delayed gratification, and they start to do amazing things like make good grades because of how great they are, and they get great job opportunities because of how great they are. Well, there's that stage when they're finally going to grow up, they're going to hit maturity, and they're going to say, okay, now it's time for me to go on my own. And when they go on their own, what your job also is to do is to have them in a position where they have a capital base that allows them to truly manifest their economic vision. It is very difficult to build businesses and open schools if you don't have access to resources. Because if you don't give them the resources, if you don't raise these assets for them, if you're not doing things like that $5 a day plan, I've been talking to you guys about this since forever, then what's going to happen is they're going to get there and it's going to feel like a flat tire. They're going to feel like, God, I had these great visions for my people, these great things, these great ideas, these wonderful things I could do for other people, but I can't do it because I don't have any resources. So now I just got to go find some white corporation that'll hire me and allow me to do what I want to do. I knew a lady who was really talented at marketing. She was really creative. And I remember she said, God, I would love to have a job at Nike so that I could be allowed to do advertising. And I said, do you really need a job at Nike to do ads? Can't you just do ads for your own business? And she didn't have much of a business. She didn't know how to start a business. So what if you had a kid that was able to create their own business and they have this talent and they can pour this talent into something that they actually own and control, as opposed to going and making somebody else rich? That's why you stay poor, is because you make everybody else rich. They're sucking resources from your community and giving you nothing back. And you're feeding into that because you're constantly hanging on to these other people to achieve the validation that's already inside of you. Remember, you've got the juice. And I'll say this is personal. This is me speaking personal. I'm biased on this because that's exactly what I trained myself to believe about myself when I started doing what I do right now. I kid you not. If you have any respect for what I do on this platform, we've taught over 1 million Black people how to buy their first share of stock at the Black Business School. We never got corporate sponsorship. We never got government money. We had one tiny investment 10 years ago that was so small that it wasn't even it didn't make a difference at all, right? But generally speaking, we did 100% of this on our own. A big part of doing this was I had to deprogram myself from believing that mainstream acceptance was an important part of being validated as a human being, as a scholar, as a Black man. I had to remind myself to just reject all of that. So eventually, when it started getting offered to me, I didn't want it. I had no interest in it. I had to remind myself that what I was doing was more valuable than anything else I could be doing out here. That it didn't have less value just because I was doing it by myself in a vacuum. When I was sitting in that apartment in Syracuse all by myself, working on stuff that nobody even knew about, nobody cared about, I had to convince myself that this is just as important as if I was doing it at Harvard University. And so practicing that line of thinking and reminding myself of that, eventually it just sunk in. And then one day I said to my wife, I said, you could literally they could call me tomorrow and offer me a chance to host a show on CNN, and I wouldn't do it because it would interrupt my afternoon naps. They could call me and offer me the chance to be president of Harvard University, and I wouldn't do it because I don't really want a stupid job like that. It's too stressful. Literally, I mean, I was just thinking, so literally, it's like once you get to that point where you see your value, you'll want to be around yourself. When you see the value in your own people, you'll want to be around your own people. You won't want to be around somebody else. What is so wonderful about white folks anyway that you are chasing them down constantly to be next to them? It doesn't mean that they're bad. This is not anti-white. This is really pro-Black. It's like, what's so great about them? Oh, I get it. They have all the money and they own the media outlets and they run the corporations. So we want to get into those corporations. We want to get access to that money. We want to be on TV or whatever it is that they have to offer. And you have to be able to walk away from that if you ever want to build something of your own. A lot of growth in anything really comes down to faith. You have to decide which horse you're going to bet on. Where are you going to pour your energy? And the Black community is typically neglected because we don't pour our energy into our own institutions. We don't pour our energy into our own communities. We don't pour our energy into our own people. We pour more energy into other people's stuff than into our own. Think about this. If you work 40 hours a week for some big corporation, 40 hours a week is 2,000 hours a year. 2,000 hours a year is 20,000 hours over a decade. 20,000 hours over a decade, over a 50-year working career is about 100,000 hours of labor that you've put into building somebody else's business. So if your labor, your 100,000 hours of labor is worth $50 an hour, then you have invested $5 million into white America. So most of us, when we do a whole working career of 50 years, 40 hours a week, 100,000 hours, we are literally individually, each of us, all 20 million of us that are working, or 10 million, 15, whatever the number is, all of us are investing $5 million into white-owned businesses. And so when you've got us investing in white-owned businesses at that level, why wouldn't white people have all the money? Why wouldn't they have all the wealth? They're supposed to. Imagine if every white person in America invested $5 million worth of labor into Black-owned businesses. We'd be the richest people on the planet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we got to rethink these things in terms of where we put our resources, where we take our talent, where we put our human capital, all those things. All right. So let me just say this. I'm going to read one more paragraph from Powernomics, page 95. You can get a copy of Dr. Anderson's book at powernomics.com. Also, just a reminder, don't forget the All Black National Convention is happening October 28th through the 30th in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to have a gathering of book club members while we're there. If you'd like to join and go to the convention, just go to boycewatkins.com. There's a link for the convention. Also, the do not pay the full hotel price. The hotel is expensive. It's $300 a night. We got a special rate of $139, something like that. So it's more than 50% lower than the regular rate. So it's a beautiful hotel, the downtown Sheraton in Charlotte. We like to do things in a classy way. We want you to feel good while you're there. Also, if you want to be a vendor, if you have a Black-owned business and you want to vend, you can go to abncvendors.com. That's abncvendors.com. And also allblacknationalconvention.com or boycewatkins.com. Either one, you can find out about the convention. So I look forward to seeing y'all at the convention. And so let me read a little bit more here. So page 95 in the book Powernomics, Dr. Anderson says, who are the schools failing? He says, one of the most frequently heard complaints in the closing years of the 20th century was that schools were failing. If public schools are failing, they are failing only whites, Asians, Hispanics, and other ethnic immigrants. Schools do not now, nor did they ever fail in what they were designed to do for Black children: create a labor class in service to white society. So we know this, I hope. The schools were not designed to liberate your kids. The schools were designed to create a labor class. They were designed to create employees. They were designed to create children that were going to be in service to Americanized capitalism and the capitalist elite. That's what these schools were designed to do. Schools have always been mirrors that reflect the values, goals, needs, and priorities of the society and the communities they serve. They have remained almost exclusively controlled by whites through government policymakers, boards of education, and major corporations. These powerful bodies approve curricula, staffing, and instructional materials. Regardless of their physical location, racial, ethnic makeup, schools across America had to teach their children European American values. The quality of teaching and the educational outcomes track the racial lines of power and wealth. The academic scores of elementary and secondary schools strongly correlate with parental income, wealth, and education. High-income students can more easily afford special coaching from parents, professional remedial help, and private schools. Schools perpetuate wealth and special racial advantages that are intergenerational in nature. So how many of you, give me a yes or no, how many of you have noticed how many Black kids graduate from school and can't even damn near read, write, can't do math, can't damn near, I mean, really almost like seems like they can't even spell their mother's name. How many of y'all, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has been astonished by this. I am literally blown away. I don't get it. I'm trying to figure this out. How can you have control of somebody's child 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 12 straight years, and they come out with the reading level of a fifth grader? What are you doing with all that time? If you gave me that much time with anybody's kids, they'd be geniuses by the time they got done. They literally, I could use 1/10 of that time and give them a better education they get through school, right? So there's obviously an inherent problem with this educational system. And one of the things that you have to understand is that this is a huge drain on Black wealth. This is draining your wealth in at least a couple of ways. One, is taking one of the most valuable assets you have in your community are your people. Human beings are a valuable asset. They knew this during slavery. Slaves were worth money. You could get a mortgage on a slave. You could borrow against the ownership of a slave. So human beings have inherent economic value. So when they're taking all your kids and they're creating these factories of thugs and wannabe gangsters and wannabe hoochie mamas that don't know nothing about how to actually contribute to the community, they are stealing wealth from you every single time. They are taking all your Malcolm Littles and they're never becoming Malcolm X because they don't even let them get exposed to people like Minister Louis Farrakhan. So they don't become Malcolm X. They just stay Malcolm Little for the rest of their life. And if you remember, Malcolm Little was a genius who used his genius for evil as opposed to good. So all the good that Malcolm did, Malcolm X did tremendous amounts of good. Malcolm Little did tremendous amounts of evil because they were both great men. It's just in one case, the gun was pointed toward the adversary. In the other case, the gun was pointed at his own face. It was pointed at the face of his mother. Right. So ultimately, they're producing your Malcolm Littles. You're not going to get a Malcolm X out of the school system. You're going to get a bunch of Malcolm Littles. And you see this in the entertainment industry with so many young Black men being wired to glorify drug dealing, drug selling, killing each other, disrespecting women, throwing their money away, passing around STDs and ruining their life. That's what that's what this system is in conjunction with entertainment is producing, for the world. The second way that your wealth is, and this is costing you to the tune of trillions of dollars. Every time you lose a Black child, understand children, young people are a tremendous asset because a nation's economic productivity and potential is heavily connected to how many young people they have. Japan is concerned. They're bringing in immigrants now because they're scared they don't have as many young people as they used to have. Europe doesn't have as many young people as they used to have, so it's going to affect their wealth. Africa has more young people than any continent on the planet. So they possess a tremendous amount of wealth. So you're going to see Africa actually as a continent and many countries in Africa really moving upward in the next 100 years, largely because they've got so many young people. So your young people are an asset. Every time they take one of your children, they turn them against you, or they make them abandon the family, or they make them into a disrespectful little piece of crap thug who ain't good for nobody. That they're taking something away from you in terms of what that young man could have been for you. That young man could have been your hardest working employee for the family business. He could have been the one coming through for the family in all kinds of ways. He could have been the protector, provider, all these other things. But instead, you're losing all of that because now you got to worry about how to get little Pookie off drugs because he's become a menace to everybody because he can't get his shit together. A lot of our families are dealing with that. Just give me a yes in the chat so that I know I'm not the only one who's dealt with this. And every time I see it, it makes me sad. Because I've dealt with both. I've dealt with working with young people who were the greatest assets in the world. Like literally, like, man, this guy, I got a guy that works for me. And I say, man, you know what? I'll give you a raise anytime because you working for me really helps me get a lot of stuff done. I'm more productive because I got you on my team and I know I can depend on you, right? And then I got other people in my own damn family where I'm like, I need to get away from you because somebody turned you into such a destructive little loser. What the hell, man? Who taught you to be so ridiculous in your behavior? Right? And I'm sorry if I'm getting, if I sound like I'm frustrated about it, but I feel the same frustration you all feel. And I think you should feel that. And you got to ask yourself, where does this come from? Remember, there's a guy, the guy that did that song. He was in that group Arrested Development, Speech. He did a song called Tennessee, Tennessee, Tennessee. Y'all remember that? So Speech was on my podcast, and Speech did a documentary called The Nigga Factory. And I love this documentary. I highly recommend it because he reminds you that there's a process for creating this. It's like an assembly line that creates Teslas, where the Teslas roll off the assembly line. Right? It's so the school system, unfortunately, becomes a factory that mass produces on a very large scale, millions and millions of youth that I don't know what to do with. You just don't know what to do with them. You can try to work with them, try to be patient with them, but what do you do if they never even grew up learning to even respect their elders? So not only do they have no skill and are making horrible life choices, but because they have no respect for you, they get mad because, oh, you're the old man who's telling me what to do and how to live my life. And so you're sitting there watching the train wreck in slow motion. You're like, if you keep accumulating babies mamas and throwing all your money away and thugging out on the corner, you're going to end up in jail, man. And you're watching this happen because you saw it. Some of y'all lived in the 90s and y'all saw these things happen. And then it happens, and then everybody's like, well, what happened? What's going on with these poor Black youth? Like, nobody did it. It's like, well, because nobody that has any sense is talking to them. They're listening to the wrong people. And this starts with school systems. It starts with broken families. That's another multi-trillion-dollar asset that you lost in your community. It goes to entertainment. When you're glorifying all the wrong things, I don't care what anybody says. If you're constantly having 9-year-olds repeat to themselves, I'm a thug nigga who hates bitches and I want to kill everybody, that's going to have an effect. I don't care if anybody, it's just entertainment. No, the fact that they got you thinking that it's just entertainment means that they're doing their job. They've tricked you. The Jewish community is brilliant in that when they created Hollywood, they knew that there's no such thing as just entertainment. What people see on the screen and what people hear in their ear affects their subconscious mind. It affects their worldview. One of the reasons that African Americans are seen as the scum of the earth by many people in other countries is because of how you're being presented in the music and in the media. There was a Nigerian lady who did a video where she was really brutally honest, and I appreciated it. She said, all the Nigerians, when we come over here, now she's generalizing, of course, but she said, when we come over, they always talk to us and they say, do not mess around with the African Americans. If you get with an African American man, he's going to get you pregnant and abandon the baby. The women, they're crazy and disrespectful and all these other things, right? So ultimately, it doesn't mean that this is true. It doesn't mean that all of us deserve that label. It doesn't make it right at all. And we know Nigerians ain't perfect. Lord knows they ain't perfect. But if you don't start confronting some of this stuff that's happening in your community, you're going to always be confused. You're going to always be left behind. You're going to keep losing the game and you're going to continue to lose because you're afraid to say, why do we keep giving the ball away to the defense? Why can't we hit our shots? If you don't confront the source of the problem will not go away. The problem will continue to fester because you're not willing to have those uncomfortable conversations because you don't want to hurt nobody's feelings or you don't want to come off as being uppity or whatever. Well, I tell you what, I think we need some uppity Black folks in the community. We need some people that just have the basic desire and ability to draw lines of what is acceptable and what is not. Just to be the ability to draw a line in the sand and say, look, this is not acceptable. Growing up 18, 19 years old, and you can't read, you can't write, you can't do math, but you somehow have all the lyrics memorized of every Cardi B song. That's not acceptable. Hey, or you out here talking crazy about Black women, that's not acceptable. Or you out here acting like a buffoon on TV, that's not acceptable. So I think it's okay, even if people call you uppity, all right? Because I've had that happen. I had some people on the internet get real mad, like, oh, he's arrogant because he says his channel's for intelligent Black people. Well, I need you to be intelligent because these white folks want to kill you. If you are not intelligent and strategic, and if you're not prepared with a plan, then they're going to take you out. The world will destroy you, and the world don't give a damn about you. They will literally kill your whole family and scream and be yelling Black Lives Matter the entire time while they're exterminating your entire community and constantly be saying Black Lives Matter while they're taking you out. And I'm not talking about physically killing you. I'm talking about economically killing you. I'm talking about spiritually killing you. I'm talking about intellectually killing you. That's what killing your families. Like, that's what I'm talking about. That's the slow death. I'm not talking about them showing up with a bunch of Uzis and shooting everybody down. I'm talking about look around. Just look around. Just go to the shade room and look at the debauchery that's put up there that's seen as just Black culture or the stuff that people are just cheering on because they just don't know any better. So when Dr. Claude Anderson talks about inappropriate behavior, maybe we need to listen to him because he comes from an era where Black folks at least had some dignity, at least had some degree of structure, at least has some ability to unify and have a plan that led to positive outcomes, safety, peace, health, and prosperity. What in the hell is wrong with wanting Black people to be safe, healthy, and prosperous? Do we think that by default, we're supposed to be in chaos and misery all the time? Is that what you really believe? Like, you really think that chaos, misery, pain, destruction, and trauma is the natural state of the Black condition? If you believe that, if you've grown to accept that, then you and I are not the same. We have to have a whole conversation because I don't want to live like that. I don't want my kids living like that. And I don't give a damn. I don't care if I lose every single friend I got. I'm not going with the niggatry. I'm not going in that direction. So we've got to set the bar. We must raise the bar as a people. We must raise the bar educationally. We must raise the bar psychologically, spiritually, in terms of health, in terms of economics, in terms of everything. We ain't got to be perfect, but you got to raise the bar and you got to draw the line. If you can't do that, then you will not succeed in a society where everybody's racing to the bottom. That's all I got to say. That's it. We're going to start next week. Next week at 8:30, we're going to start on page 96 of Powernomics. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. I hope everybody will respect Dr. Anderson and support him if you can, if you have the ability to do that. He's got a whole library pack of all of his books for $99. I hope you'll get that for your children, for your cousins. Get it for other people's kids because some of these kids are lost. They ain't got no good parents. You are the beacons of hope in the community. You are the vanguards. You are the leaders. And I want you to embrace that and internalize that. I want you to be ready to fight. You know, I need you to be a spiritual, intellectual soldier in this. I need you to really fight, you know, just sort of just say, okay, this is who we are. This is what we represent. And it's okay to do that. You know, it's okay to love yourself. It's okay to want better for your people. It's okay to push to a higher standard. Don't ever let anybody make you feel bad about that because we are going to win. We will win. Some of our kids, some of your kids are going to grow up and become billionaires and maybe even a trillionaire one day. And they're going to have power that is beyond belief. And it's going to start right here. It's going to start with the foundation from the fact that they're going to say, I remember back when I was 6 and my parents used to sit and listen to Dr. Boyce and they used to come with talk about Powernomics and Dr. Claude and everything else. And that's what I was raised on. They're going to carry that. And they're also going to carry the courage that comes with that, the intentionality that comes with that. You can't be great without being intentional about your greatness. So be intentional. You are great. If you start with that attitude that says that that's what we can be, that's what we're going to be, that's what I stand for, that's where I draw my line. So excellence, excellence, excellence. Thank you guys for listening. It was great to see you. And again, don't forget the convention is the 28th. So I hope you guys will consider coming to Charlotte. You can go to boycewatkins.com to learn about the convention. Also, in a couple of days, if you're interested in Forex, by the way, a guy named Courtney Logan, who's a really smart guy. He was a 4-time national debate champion, actually. He's a lawyer, but he's also an expert on Forex, highly licensed in a lot of areas. He's actually going to do a free presentation in the Black Business School on the 2nd. So if you'd like to join that, just go to boycewatkins.com and everybody's welcome. So until then, I'll see you guys next week or maybe tomorrow. Who knows? And you guys have a great day. It was wonderful talking to you. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.